A couple I thought might be coming. We don't see them yet. I have 3:32 here, so with respect to everyone's time, I recommend that we get started, and of course, we'll welcome anyone whenever they're able to join us. So we convene the meeting, and the notes from the November 8th meeting are there, and we thank Heather once again for doing a great job with that. More information there that should match what we have for our notes. Great to have that there. And I put the documents on there in case anyone wasn't able to join the last meeting. And you can scroll down on this one agenda to see all the other previous agendas as well, if you had missed any and wanted to see, with all the links and everything there. So everything for this task force to date is found in this document, with links to others as necessary. Any questions or comments about the notes or the last meeting? Do you think we captured anything, like everything that you said, or did you find that we may have missed some things or state them a little differently? Wonderful, then, thank you. If you review them now and do notice anything we are most interested, we do want to make sure that we record as you wish us to. So today, then, our focus is to finish the other tenets, engaged, supported, and challenged. And based on our last meeting, we did go back and try to capture those elements that were already shared in the folder. Additional items were added today, which I've not had the chance to yet review. So if you submitted something today, maybe even yesterday, I didn't check yesterday either, then maybe your information is not here, but we can cut and paste that on there just to be sure. That was a great recommendation, and we did that for anything that was already shared. Any comments, questions? Then we're looking at engaged, and if you have this link to this document that's also shared now on the screen, so you can look at it if you'd like to see it, and the past tenets are also on there. The very first page reminds us of what the descriptions are for those things that involve engagement. So there's a paragraph there. That's great. Go and you can see that paragraph of what engaged encompasses. I'll give you a minute just to review that. So we go from the natural curiosity up to possible employment for adolescents. All of those are engaged. So I may have missed some things that were in the folder for engaged, and I do apologize because we don't have anything on our document here. So someone would like to get started, please raise your hand or open your mic, and we will entertain those pieces that you think are connected to engage that you want to make sure we note.
Roseanne.
Thank you.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to mention that I listened to the Kennedy Forum, who said they're making school-based health centers a national priority, and I wanted
Yes.
to mention that first. I attended a webinar about sensory integration symptom, and this is something that behavioral health people cannot diagnose. Only sensory occupational therapists can do this. But it was pretty striking about the need that occurs in the schools, and all of the children that have these kinds of issues that really can't be addressed by the school. They could perhaps be addressed by referrals by pediatricians to sensory occupational therapists. But I was told that many times pediatricians are not aware of the issues and they don't refer over to sensory occupational therapists. So that's one thing that I felt needed to happen. Second of all, in terms of engagement and what kids need, it's very hard to pay attention when you're an adult or you're a child. If I ask people what I just said, maybe most of you wouldn't be able to tell me because our minds are so full of other things that we're dealing with. And that happens with children too. And I just wanted to note that all of the things that kids are dealing with, besides on an individual level, but things like the poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, safe places, those things are on their minds too when they're in school. And it's very hard to engage people when their minds are full of thoughts about other things or their concerns about home. The next thing is about kinesthetic learners. A lot of the kids are kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing, but they don't have the opportunities as much to learn in the school system by doing. So maybe the communities could help out by providing other opportunities, even in elementary school. Many times you hear about more opportunities for high schoolers, but if you don't start that with elementary school children, they're going to miss out on a lot of their learning. And the other thing in terms of engagement is there was a note in the Kennedy Forum webinar about how people need to be in contact with similar to them, to other people who are similar to them. And so that means people from the community with disabilities, people who overcame poverty, inequalities that exist for females, people like our president who overcame stuttering, all kinds of people from different races, religions, and sexual orientations who were successful, who could come and show people in the different schools how they became successful. And also maybe from the high school, people who can't engage, we don't think they're engaged, but maybe they would engage if people would think of them in terms of their expertise in building and making and creating and doing things with their hands, and they could go down to elementary and middle schools and be role models.
Do you think, Roseanne, we should still put in here support for school-based health centers?
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that has come up in the previous two tenets. But again, I think it certainly makes sense here as well.
Sure. Well, it'll remind us too of how prevalent it is if we see it under more than one tenet.
This is Alice. Do you mind
Please.
if I jump in here? Is that
Please.
okay?
Please.
Thank you. Roseanne, those are all really important areas. One of the things that I think, although I'm new to the commission or this task force, so I don't exactly know where to say it, but the reality is that sensory integration is not paid for by Medicaid. And OT evals for that are not paid for, which is, I think, one of the greatest horrors in our state because it's such a great eval. And we run an autism intellectual disability center for children and adults. We just opened it a few years ago, and we're already currently on our 4th license. In order to do OT and PT, we would need another license. So the elaborateness needed to be able to have a holistic sort of wraparound, kind of engagement for families is quite problematic. Aside from folks who do that work and hard to find. The other thing that I just really, and Roseanne, I'm sorry I missed that school-based health center presentation, because it sounds like it was really informative, but in Connecticut, the current school-based health centers are still based on a medical model. So right. And so, there's usually some great nurses or doctors assigned, and it, therapy is billed on a fee-for-service level. We're seeing in the schools a much more important need for whole school approach, which is clinicians assigned to grades. It's the model we did at Sandy Hook and the model we're doing here in New Haven and in Norwalk, where we're currently grant funded, which is terrible because you're relying on grants. But there should be an alternative payment methodology to be able to cover a school or two, two clinicians or so, and to integrate care coordination for families, for basic needs and social determinants. The current billable model just doesn't work in a school. I might have repeated myself from last time, but my school-based health clinicians they usually have 5 kids in line, 1 kid who may have a treatment plan and has a Medicaid, and then 4 others who are sent down by the principal to be able to, because their kid is out of control, and maybe they don't have a treatment plan, maybe they don't have permission from the mother to, do individual therapy. So they're doing a lot of work for free, if you will, that's not paid for through billable model. And the underfunding for behavioral health in the school-based clinics is very, very low. We're lucky that we get 70 or 80,000 for a cost that's well over 200. So it's just not financed correctly in our personal experience.
And do you think if it were that the personnel are available, are the clinicians and people that we need for those centers available to work, or is there a
right now? No one. Right now, we're in a workforce nightmare.
Right.
But I'm hoping we move out of that, in the next year or so. But I'm pretty clear that we need to develop a whole school model, very similar to what CDC has done on this whole school model, but for behavioral health, where you're really looking at, like Roseanne said, on the interactions, similar experiences, really look at, a lot of kids are not able to focus because they're hungry, and we have put food closets in the schools where, you don't have to ask for your food, but you can get a backpack of food on a Friday, because a lot of kids don't have food over the weekends. Those kinds of more creative, interdisciplinary supports are very important for our kids.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, perfect. Tracy.
So something that comes up for the judicial branch is that we are in desperate need for hands-on job training programs for our kids. Even, kids coming into our system, they don't even know what's out there. They don't even know what skills they have. They've never once taken a job skills assessment. They can't even see a different life than what they know. So desperately need for more hands-on job training. And when they're involved with us, all of those opportunities are free to them, right? Whether they're in residential, whether they're in outpatient services on probation. But the minute probation ends, those services or those opportunities are not always free, right? Are not always readily available. So I would say that if these job opportunities can be free reduced fee, sliding scale fee, something to get these kids engaged so they don't have to remain court involved just to have access to that.
Yeah, I found a new program myself that I'm now using with my youngest learners even to start career exploration and awareness. It's really awareness, right? So you start knowing other jobs that are available in your community, which in a global sense, and then you can see other possible choices. So most people use Naviance in schools, but there's this program that I have instead, Zello, I found, which I think really does that at a younger age, and you can't start too soon because they really do need that. Yeah. And then the other things that you've mentioned too are yeah, very important. Thank you.
But just to add on to what Tracy was
Yeah.
saying, this is where we need the broader community to help support us. You know, manufacturers, insurance companies, medical facilities, everyone who's out there who's looking to hire, help us with internships, you know, for kids. And I just started a program in a district I'm working in with Children's Medical Center, just to have kids come in. A lot of kids say, oh, they want to work in medicine. There are hundreds of jobs in medicine besides doctors and nurses. So we're going to bring some students in, have them shadow, have them understand what's needed. So when they're in high school, they're picking the right science courses. You know, if they decide in 12th grade and they don't have a biology course and an A&P course and those kinds of things. So I think community partners are huge right now to really help support our kids.
And is that shadowing possible, Anne-Marie, during the pandemic? Are they allowing the
They're
students?
allowing it, very small group.
Yeah, okay.
Very select right now. And it's only, it would have been like several weeks. Right now it's going to be some done on, you know, virtual. Like the student can interview who they're going to shadow.
Yeah.
You know, what are your job skills? What do you actually do all day long? So that we're starting it small, but it is definitely a need.
Yeah, that's something. Right, great. Barbara.
Yeah, I wanted to say piggyback on what Anne-Marie was saying. I know for kids in special education, you know, transition planning is a thing, but it unfortunately isn't usually as good as it could be. And unfortunately, these kids end up a lot of washing dishes and doing, you know, really lower skilled gigs where they could do a whole lot more. And I know there's a, you know, there is a plan and they do get tested and there's an attempt to try to get, but I do feel a lot more attention. And you're right, if the community could get more involved with all the kids, I think it also could make that, you know, we could really reach higher for some of the kids who are in special education.
Excellent. Christopher's getting everything.
So we also have, you know, our students with disabilities, some of them now.
You went mute, Anne-Marie.
Some of our students with disabilities are staying with us until they're 22 years old. So that means 8 years in the high school. And it's a challenge, you know, it's a challenge because you want to give them those experiences that are more than just dishwashing or those kinds of things. But we don't have anything out there that we can really tap into.
Well, I will say there are, I mean, it's not supposed to be 8 years of high school. It's supposed to be 4 years of.
Oh, I know what it's supposed to be.
So, you know, but some colleges do have it, but it's rare and there are big waiting lists. But the ones who do it, like Gateway, for instance, they have a huge long waiting list, but those kids do really well, you know, and so these are kids who have skills, a lot of splinter skills. So I just think that, again, we have a lot of talent pool, and just because someone has an IEP doesn't necessarily, so I just say we can look a little harder. That's all.
Right. However, those extra years are on the school district to plan.
Yeah.
So that's my point. You
But
know?
I'm saying if you can get someone an excellent gig or an excellent job that leads to a college education, then that.
Oh,
then
yeah,
the state,
absolutely.
you know, yes, the district pays for it for a few years, but the state isn't paying for them for the rest of their lives. So
Right,
that's
right. Mike, welcome. And please, what would you like to share?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, there was a script with my emails. I apologize. So
Yeah, no worries.
I'm late to the party. The bulk of our work is disconnected and disengaged young people. So has that already been discussed and kind of where they fit into the scope of all children? I don't want to, if that's coming up or you've already done that.
Repeat it again, even if it has been, because engaged is what we really want to talk about with those disengaged learners. So please go.
Yeah, just saying, like for us, like what we've seen is like right now in Stanford, we have what we say, we are trying to get young people who are ready, willing, and able to come to school and be in school. So we target those young people who are not in that position yet. So many have come in, they come in with both in middle school and high school, already below, they're already truants between 50 and 85%. They've been suspended, expelled, and failing classes. So we're trying, our work is similar to what Alice said, like we spend an entire, our entire day with them in the Stanford public schools from, picking them up at 6 in the morning, getting them breakfast, getting them ready, helping their families. And this is 7 days a week, literally 24 hours a day, for young people who aren't showing up. And then when they're in there, because they haven't been there in a while, they're externalizing behaviors, get them suspended. So we're doing a lot of work with the district around those types of things in the school engagement model. But a lot of it is some of it's already been said. We do not use a clinician approach, or we are youth development specialists. So we do a lot. And again, we are in the building all day long. At one high school, we have 10 family advocates, and in another one we have 5, to be 10 in the next 2 years. Seriously, what we believe this approach is again to get them ready, willing, and able to be in the classroom. On a second note, we work with disconnected and disengaged young people in the community in our workforce development program. So similar, hearing about internships and all that, we're creating social enterprises, which is and trying to get funding for supported employment, so we can get, because right now we have a 1-day contract with UConn Stanford, which we believe is going to be expanded to some other community colleges, and we're looking to work with a couple of other businesses. So that's kind of how we're tackling that, getting them ready to work, because many can't even handle internships because they've never been employed in the past. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So do you think, Mike, that if the school-based health centers were there and not charged as they do now, that would support the family advocates, or we're really not the same at all?
Yeah, it's not the same, because we do have health clinics
Okay.
in all the schools we're in. Our level of young people, it's not even that. Like, we're literally finding them, getting them back to the building.
Okay.
When they're in the building, they've struggled, but we utilize the health centers in the buildings.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you. Beth, please.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Sorry, I was on the phone until now.
No worries.
To Mike and to Alice's point, I think the challenges are very different than the medical model can address. It's really comprehensive. But what I wanted to raise awareness of from what Alice said is just this focus on executive function and emotional regulation. In early childhood, I can always remember this as a program director. I would see a kid with sensory integration issues, and you can see them like this in a 3-year-old if you've worked with young children, and the parents don't know what they're dealing with. And so the dysregulation leads to more dysregulation. And if you could get to that parent early around what sensory integration was and support them, that was a help. But the issue was, unless a child was lucky enough to have a lisp or a language delay, you could not get them occupational therapy. And I'll never understand why it's so hard to get kids occupational therapy. It's hard in across birth to 3, which I oversee, so I think it needs examining there. It's difficult when they get to schools, but we would have, say in a school of 100, we might have 6 getting special education services. 4 of them would be getting OT, but only because they had some other disability. And then they'd go to elementary school. So we'd go from like 1 OT for every 20 preschool special education students to 1 OT for every 200 special education students. Something happens when they hit the public schools. Suddenly there are no OTs, or it's not appreciated. And when we talk about school-based health clinics, that's just not something that is reimbursed, to Alice's point. And, I know this committee is talking about comprehensive needs of children. I don't know what could help Mike's problem more than getting focus on executive function and social regulation in those early years, and making occupational therapy and intervention for sensory integration issues available from the start in Connecticut. I think we'd see huge differences, because I'll stop after I say this. Once again, the family is the most important educator for their children. And when you have a dysregulated child who isn't responding in a way that makes sense to the parent, they say, oh, the child's bad and I need to really crack down, which is often the opposite of what a kid needs with sensory integration. They need understanding of why they're responding that way when they walk on sand, or when something gets on their fingers, or whatever it is. So I just want to really emphasize that what Alice was talking about in older children is true in younger children. And I think a lot of it is what Mike's talking about. And you spend a lot more later trying to teach kids executive function and emotional regulation. And frankly, the brain isn't wired to learn it at that age in the same way as it is when it's younger. So I'll shut up now, but thank you.
No, but that was good. So for the legislature, do you think that the key is the billing, that it only certain things are paid for, or what's the real highlight that we can take away, do you think, for the legislature?
I think for the legislature, I think to Alice's point, if there was some kind of Medicaid waiver for occupational therapy for young children, for older children, as Alice was saying, we need some kind of demonstration project, but it's OT/executive function supports. I think that could be a game changer. And I actually think there's a lot of evidence from the work in Sandy Hook and in New Haven to show that this makes a difference, that everybody with a face understands what emotional regulation looks like. Great, and how to support it.
Roseanne?
Yeah, thank you. To go along with what Beth is saying, I was just amazed. I've worked in a school-based health center now for many years, and I watched the kids go down the hall, many kids go down the hall, holding onto their walls, running their fingers down, getting into trouble because their hands are all over the walls. Kids get into trouble because one child in the front of another child doesn't like to be touched. The child in the back of them has a need to touch people who want to keep their hoodies on because they feel secure, people who are out of control because their jackets are on and they're way too hot and we're telling them to put it on because it's cold outside. I mean, there are so many issues that aren't being addressed, and they're not going to be addressed if it's not so-called an academic issue. It might be a behavioral issue. Maybe a lot of the issues that make kids get criticized and then they don't want to go into school because nobody understands what they're dealing with. And that starts at elementary school, maybe preschool or first, what'd you say,
Yeah, Roseanne, it's such a great example. Kids that are touching the wall to get centered and they're in trouble all the time. It's like such a great example why we need to train everybody.
That was going to be the point I was going to bring up, because I was reading through bunches of reports today from the CDC and the Aspen Institute and all other groups, and uniformly they advocate professional development, professional learning for all practitioners. And so I wanted to raise the issue with you all today, because I think it's absolutely something we have to advocate for. But I think we also need to be 150% clear that it can't be one more thing that people are going to be asked to do half-assedly with no additional time or resources. So I think if we're going to put this in, and I think we need to well, also include the other recommendation that those organizations likewise make is that there need to be resources made available to not just to educators, but really anybody who's working with young people and families, so that they're trauma informed and they're aware of students' behavioral needs, their psychological needs, and so forth.
If I just may
Please.
add, and maybe Commissioner Bai, this is a question for you, and I don't know if this is something this committee should take up or recommend, but I mean, the buzz around universal pre-K, and when we have 30% of our kindergartners having any kind of a pre-K experience, all that, deregulation, all that is coming in to kindergarten year. And it's serious. We actually, the district, I was working, and we did partner with obviously your organization last summer, and was able to offer some summer programs for kids. And we're really looking at those students that have come in, even though it was a short program, they just came in a little bit above, right? Because they knew the school, they felt comfortable. They knew what teachers looked like. They knew what some transitions were like, those kinds of things. And then our other students, it's very worrisome.
Anne Marie, it's a really excellent point. You totally know a lot of different districts in Connecticut, and I do think we should put in our universal preschool / childcare, because we're looking at it as a single system. Childcare is preschool, preschool is childcare. Is that having some kind of summer program for kids that we've missed? We should look at that as like a piece of the comprehensive system. And I'll be meeting with superintendents along with Charlene in the near future. So
Okay.
I'll put that in our notes now, but it's a really excellent point. Those ARPA dollars, I think we were able to help a couple thousand kids with some
Right.
experience where they'd had none. We also found that we were able to just ship parents some information who were home with their own children around child development and around social emotional learning and around the early learning standards, translated for parents. And we found that made a really big difference too. So really good point. And I do think the social emotional learning has to be a big part of this system, starting early. So it's a good point about how do we translate that into legislative action? Like, as we look at outcome goals, how do we not fall into the same trap that schools did, where they measured what's easy to measure? How do we make sure the early learning system is looking at these executive function comprehensive goals? And that could be a charge from the legislature that any, early childhood data system include executive function. And Anne-Marie, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know, but maybe executive function. What do you call it in the education world?
No, executive functioning,
Yeah.
executive functioning, right? And even that whole SEL piece. And what we found in the summer is that, our kids really needed to learn play.
Exactly.
They needed to
Totally.
water play and, all those kinds of
The
things.
sensory.
Instead,
Yeah.
and move from parallel play into playing, with the group and understanding, sharing, and all those basic kinds of things. So, it's a whole package of what our little ones need, our 3 and 4 year olds. It truly is.
Yeah.
Well, that
Really
universal,
great point.
yeah, that universal preschool childcare really encompasses much more than just engaged. We know it helps families. We know how many women had to leave,
Oh my goodness.
the workforce, and because of having no childcare when schools were closed, there's just a lot of things that can really help as we move forward to make sure that the child is cared for in all respects. And universal pre-K with the child care and a special focus with social emotional, I think is key there. Yeah, great. Roseanne.
I just wanted to again emphasize this issue about children who learn by doing rather than by listening or by hearing, because I think some of the, I may be wrong, but I think some of the people Michael was talking about, they've never been appreciated for the way that they learn. So they're constantly told that they're failing, but they may be failing because the educational system was not able to apply doing in terms of their learning. And so they have been brought up that they don't know how to learn when they do, they just learn differently. It's not better or worse, it's just a different style of learning.
Yeah, I thought by now that was pretty obvious, but I'm hearing from you that you don't see that. I mean, we even have, for the sensory, we have sensory halls in our school just to be sure that students can touch walls and do all kinds of activities in the hall. But we're hearing you, so we'll make sure we include all of these things that have been mentioned. Any other engaged? That was a really powerful discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to say one more thing,
Yeah,
just about engaged.
Yeah.
Is that I think, the experience I've seen over over 20 years, 30 years here, is that you can't suspend your way out of young people's behaviors. And I see that coming more and more. And, in our organization, we've made a decision that we're not going to just sit and say, let's try to figure that out. We're going up against the school system and the school board, who are our partners, but we're saying, you can't do this anymore. You can't have restorative justice staff members and still suspend kids, because you'll never suspend your way out of it. So we're trying to talk, I've talked to different school districts who've asked us to come in and talk about what we do. And there's a community school model in New York City, which I'm sure it's other places as well, probably here, I just don't know about it, where both the CBO and the school run the school together. So you're not just making in a vacuum from a Board of Education standpoint, where you're doing it with the CBO who provides support and wraparound. But when it comes to all the big decisions, which is who needs to be suspended, who needs this, all those things, it's made collaboratively, not in a vacuum.
I also just wanted to add, I'm obviously, we're still in a pandemic, it's been going on now, 18 months, 19 months. Obviously, it's had tremendous effects on everyone. And something, we were doing a data team meeting, and our second graders, when you think of this, our second graders have never been in school a full year, right? They missed kindergarten from March on. Last year was hybrid or whatever. Now they're in second grade, and we're trying to, get them ready academically. And I don't know if it belongs here, but can we just ignore the pandemic if we're coming out and making some recommendations? Just throwing it out. I'm not sure which way to go, but it has such effect, and it'll have really effects for years on some of those, on all of our kids, really.
Absolutely. And the staff. Okay, great. So let's move to support.
Sorry, Alicia.
Please.
My mute button was, and my camera's off because my husband is also on a video call, and
sure.
But I just wanted to say one thing. I just loved hearing about your experience having sensory spaces in schools for kids. And I think one thing I would just add to that, because it's something that you may consider a matter of course, whereas in other districts they're still catching up to those kinds of things. And so I think it's worth, we've said it in other tenets as well, but it's worth saying it here as well, that we have a real big equity issue here in Connecticut. There's such a huge gulf between what some kids have access to and what others don't. So, I think it needs to be addressed at a very fundamental level.
Here, Colin. I think one of the issues too is that the districts with the higher needs, the districts that have been flagged, right, because of our fixation with the test scores, have basically been squeezed. The screws have been put to them really because of federal policy, and so as a result, the discrepancies are particularly bad there because the turnover rates for educators, administrators, and teachers and everybody else are higher in those high needs districts. And the curriculum has been particularly narrowed in those districts because of the fixation on literacy and math. And as a result, their prescribed professional development for their faculties is much more all-encompassing than it would be for a district like Alicia's, or the one in which I worked in Massachusetts. And so I think that that's something that we need to do if we really do want to deal with the equity issues and the discrepancies that we see. We need to make sure that we're really loosening, not lowering standards, but recognizing that test-based accountability doesn't solve the problem. And that's what Beth was, I think, alluding to earlier, that we can't have happen to early childhood what we've allowed to have happen to K-12.
Yeah, if I can chime in, Christopher, there was a report from OECD that just came out in the past couple months around this, around how do we turn back the clock and use research to sort of pull back on some of the negative impacts on emotional health of the testing. And they compared across multiple countries. I can try to get that. I'll try to find that and send it to the committee. But I will say, when you're saying, what can we tell the legislature? I found this incredible tension going on where it's like, read by third grade, tightly prescribed, like the legislature prescribing things to the districts that are looking at the whole child. Meanwhile, Rome is burning, and we want more testing and more dibbling and more dibbling. Right. Is like dibbles is an assessment. Oh, yeah. And so I do think, like, if recommendations to the legislature around concerns about testing and state prescription about, like, state prescriptions around skills in reading and math that lead to that. And I will say, even though they went in, for years, I fought the high school reforms, which were, again, tightly prescribing kids to so many years of math and English, again, not leaving space for the arts and other topics that supported children's emotional health. And now it came true, unfortunately. We held it off for probably 6 years, but now it's true. And now all the districts are like, well, now we can't do this because now we have to meet the legislature's 28 credits or however many it is, I should remember. But I live in a community where 23% of the kids take a quarter of their credits in the arts. That's not going to happen anymore. Won't be able to happen anymore because the legislature has tightly prescribed what has to happen in schools, leaving less room for this emotional health. And so I don't know if this committee could just think about putting something forward to say, caution. I know it's all with good intent, but we have to be careful to leave space for kids' executive function and social emotional skills.
Right. And knowing that we still need accountability because that's not going away. Right. Yeah. I see Anne Marie and Alice.
Okay. And just to go on what the commissioner said, that was exactly why I gave that example of the second graders, right? Because in some folks' minds, right, the state's minds, by third grade, you've learned to read, and then you're reading to learn from then on. And quite honestly, we have second graders, right, who are almost 2 years, because of nothing they did, nothing the school did. I mean, it was the pandemic. And yet, how do we get them to read next year? Because we don't want to put all that emotionality on them in failure and that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's something to think about. I don't know what we can do from a committee, maybe just at least put it out there. I don't know.
Because for next year, we have even more requirements. Not exactly sure, but with the whole, early literacy, it's really, they're ramping that up. So yeah, we'll have to think about that. Alice.
Thank you. I just, first of all, love the conversation. I think everybody's making really great points. And as a former drama therapist, I think you can learn and play at the same time. So play is really where we all learned. So go play. The thing that I think that we just want to make sure that is included in here is the whole family concept.
Mhm.
right? Mike said it with his point around I think you called them care coordinators, Mike. I could be wrong. Community advocates.
No, we call them family advocates.
Family advocates. That our families need to be stable in order for the kids to be ready and able to learn. And so that Mike's idea of, that school in New York where the CBO and the school co-ran, I love that idea, Mike. I can't wait to talk to you more about that. Haven't heard that as much. In UCLA, they have a separate, the Unified School District in LA has a separate nonprofit that raises and helps the school district in those particular areas. But I even like the idea better. But the idea of going into the home and helping the family figure out ways to get the kid to school, but also what are some of the current barriers for the child, and the family. Why is this child always late? Well, because I don't get off of work until 6 a.m. and, blah, blah, blah. So making sure we have resources for family in there. And I think you're talking about engagement. You need to have people who our families can engage with. I come from New Haven and, we're, our community-based health workers look a lot more like our community in terms of diversity and language diversity. And our families trust people who look more like them in terms of telling them the resource, the help that they really need. So, and I'm sure Mike's team, also has a lot of very good community health organizing aspects to them, and they're able to engage the family on that level. So workforce is tough for master's level, but I think it's a little bit easier, or as I think it was Anne Marie, or no, I forget who said was, there are 100 other jobs other than doctors in the hospital, right? Anyway, there's a lot of jobs in behavioral health or in mental health and education that don't need a master's degree. Thank you.
Thank you. So some of the things you mentioned, I start to see a bit in supported where you see more of the family brought in now. And we have examples that we put in here about helping to train for sensitivity, to regard minority recruitment as very important, which could be used again, not just in schools, but in other aspects of supporting the whole child. And then when we get to other support, we see for different behavioral problems that could be caused by other issues you can see with respect to drugs, alcohol, any kind of abuses. They're listed here as things that are necessarily important. Gambling has also been listed. Mental health underneath that comes in for all of these to support there. And then the last on here for consideration is developmental assets and the idea of young people being involved in activities which can help them, and then trauma-informed care. So some things that we've already heard for other tenants as well. Those are the ones that we culled from the information already submitted. So let's continue on and hear from others about the supported tenant. Please either unmute or raise your hand. Roseanne.
Yeah, hi. I guess for the supportive, the first thing I said was parents. Parents know their child best and are their greatest teachers, as I think was already said. So they need to be involved in the school, and the schools need to ask them how they can be involved. I know they're starting I forgot what they call it, but a group where there will be parents on this team, and they'll meet 3 times a year to discuss the issues that parents think that they need to make the school a better school. During COVID, it's been a struggle to have parents more involved in the schools, and that's a given, but so, participation could remain virtually, at least right now, but it's how, like someone mentioned, about parents' work schedules or about their transportation and how reliable it is to get the child to school. If they miss a bus, what do you do? I've had parents that, I work with both parents and children in my clinical work. So they will ask me, how can I get my child to school when they missed the bus or they were sick or something was going on in the day that they didn't get to school on time. Kids get bored during vacations. They miss being in school. And it would be nice if there was something in the community. I know I just got this thing from one of the towns that they're having an annual Thanksgiving Day 5K race and a kids fun race. Those kind of things during the holidays from the community would be really helpful for the children. I don't know if any of the businesses or whoever could staff or help run some of these issues. The other thing I wanted to mention is the support needed for the schools. One of the things that was brought up in the Kennedy Forum webinar that I went to was what the schools need, and they were talking about having wellness centers, which included support for the people who work in the schools.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there going to be a section? I apologize. It's,
Go ahead.
I have one lane that I drive and travel in. So, because I think a lot of the overall, it seems some of the stuff I've read and seen, it is for kids who are already, many are already showing up to school. I don't know if you can just mention, because it's a whole different way to work with young people who are disconnected and disengaged from little. And I agree with a lot of things you said of, we've said this for 30 years, of course, get them when they're younger, of course. But then when kids, for whatever reason, don't get that, they're kind of left, they're suspended, and it's legal to give them 2 hours a day of academics. So, which is not right and it's not just. So anywhere where there could be something where people understand in the legislature, this is a whole population, which it might take literally a year to get them back engaged and then start to learn. So, that's a lot of what our work is. And certainly it's working with the families, but it's its own separate group. I don't know how that could be written or done so people understand or have to ask what's disconnected and disengaged mean.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, can you give me a for instance or two, just so I can put it in here, as to why they haven't been connected in school, why they've been out of school?
I think a lot of it is what people said, for all the social emotional stuff, many have been suspended, expelled. They're 3 to 4 grades behind in reading and math. And it's my understanding, at least, in the 2 districts I've worked in, New Haven and Stamford, you're allowed to give somebody 2 hours a day of academics. So you're not going to learn, you're 3 grades behind, and you don't have to be a certified teacher to cover that. So, what we say at Domus is, and we say it publicly wherever, we're the last stop to the pipeline to prison. So people recognize once you've been arrested and then you're a justice kid, but we're trying to prevent them so they don't go down that, so if you're expelled or suspended, like here's an example. If you're out of school suspended for whatever reason, 10 days, then you get sick for a few, then you, you went away somewhere, you already can't graduate. So what do? You drop out. You're like, well, there's no hope. So what we're trying to do down here, for an example, is instead of blaming people, which is not, that's not our vibe, is to say, can you in school suspend them to our building where we'll do restorative justice and we have a work and learn center. All these things that's going to hopefully get them back, and constantly working with them and their families and whoever their beef is with to get them back in the buildings. but it can't just be you're out, you're out. And then we're also looking at, we need to get young people where they're at. The model of saying to somebody disconnected is, okay, come to school. Well, now you're a truant. It's like, no, we might need learning teams, youth development specialists, clinical people, and teachers to go to their houses. So if we're looking at the whole need, that's what a disconnected and disengaged. It's not like they haven't heard somebody say, you need to go to school. That's out the window. They've been texted and called and whatever else.
All right. Barbara?
I wanted to just echo what Michael was saying, but in another situation where children with mental health issues, with anxiety, we've seen it through the roof, and they're hospitalized for 30 days, or they miss weeks and weeks and weeks of school. And unfortunately, the clinical model doesn't always jive with the educational model. And these can be excellent students who now have, with COVID and everything else. So I agree with him. The requirements of what we should be able to offer them should be much better than what they're currently, they can be out for 10 days with nothing. And then they get an hour a day, and that's considered, appropriate. And so it's just not enough. We should be supporting them much more, especially children with mental health issues as well.
Okay. Anything else for supported? We had a lot on here already too.
We've mentioned it up and engaged, but I think it's necessary here too to talk about increasing numbers of educators and other professionals who work with them, increasing better quality of professional development, professional learning opportunities for educators and other professionals, and then at the same time to make sure that the population of individuals who are working with kids and families increasingly reflect the kids and families whom they serve.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of work going on about increasing the number of minority individuals in the teaching force, but I think we should sort of lean in that direction as well.
Absolutely. Not just for the teaching force, right?
Right.
Good. Okay, challenged. This is our last tenet. Roseanne.
Hi, I had my hand up a little bit for the
Oh,
last one too, but I don't
go
know
ahead.
exactly which one this goes into. It was what
Sure.
was Barbara was talking about mental health issues.
Sure.
And this year, my understanding is if a child is out for COVID, they can attend the online schooling while they're quarantined. But if they're just normally sick and they don't have COVID, they cannot. They lose their learning this year. And I think that was something that I'm not sure, but maybe in the legislature for this year. I'm being careful about this, but in terms of challenged, I do want to say, I know we're not really here to talk about COVID a lot, but for the past year and a half, I've been doing telehealth, and I've been talking to parents and children and families who have COVID in elementary school. I've heard their parents being unable to barely breathe when they talk to me. I've heard their children in another room being terrified that their parents are going to die in the other room where they are, and they can't get a hug, and they can't get a handshake, and they can't see their parents. This is the kind of things that elementary school children have been through over the last 18 months. So if you want to talk about challenged or engaged or whatever, they have been through just an enormous amount. They're afraid that they're going to die. I have children that were afraid to go back to school because they got COVID in school, and now they are lying down for my sessions. I say, "What's wrong with you?" They said, "I might die. I have COVID." These are 7-year-olds. So this has been an enormous impact on everyone, as I guess people know. But in regard to learning, kids were criticized for not learning what the schools are requiring them to learn to pass the particular tests. But these children didn't stop learning. They learned a lot more than little kids should ever know over the past 18 months or so. But they also found ways to connect to the world through things like YouTube. They learned everything through YouTube, things that they're so interested in that nobody asks them about. Some people learned about medicine. They were learning about their bodies. Some people were learning about making jewelry. Some people were learning about making movies. They were creating, they were doing all this stuff. They were connecting with sports teams in a different part of the world. Nobody asks them about that. You know, there are so many other ways that kids connect and learn right now, and they haven't stopped learning. So, you know, the other parts about all the activities that they learn from, but kids, at least the kids that I deal with, they also learn from going to the parents. I have kids who are going to the shelters this Thanksgiving to give to others. They learn to give their old clothes and their old toys to others. They learn to work at different places with their parents as volunteers. Those kids are doing that. They care. The other thing I'm also told by kids is to search it up. They say, Miss Roseanne, search it up. And they teach me about all sorts of things, and I let them teach me, and I tell them how much I learned from them. And I do that in my groups. I teach them how to lead. I also teach them how to follow. And they love to share with each other. But, you know, COVID has kind of put a limit on how much kids can share with it, you know, share normally with each other and be with each other. So they like to do my telehealth groups. And so what I said was, is it the children that need to be challenged or the adults? If you listen, kids will constantly challenge you. Well, at least they challenge me. I have to do what is constantly being said to them. I have to pay attention.
Is there any concern about telehealth going away in the near future that you want to address at all, Roseanne?
Oh, I sure hope that it's not going to go
I
away.
know.
I sure hope not. You know, every time, you know, a child gets sick or gets quarantined still, somebody has to try to reach out to them. And I had to, you know, there was a need to reach out to the families, not just the children. I had to find out how the parents were doing so I could calm down the children, that the parents weren't dying when I'd see the parent in this room and the child in another room of the house. And, you know, sometimes for very odd reasons, they can't connect to video, or their phone is too low, or, you know, their system is too low to connect to video. So I can switch over to the phone if I have to and do the session on the phone. But I'm still in contact with them. I haven't lost that contact. So I'm hoping that they both stay permanently.
Yeah. Okay, Tracy.
So when I think of this last tenet, I equate challenge to kind of this future educational opportunities. And obviously, when you think of continuing education in college, it equals out to expensive costs, right? And so this is not something that many families can even think about, right? Financially, that is almost impossible to think about further education. I have family in Tennessee, and I can tell you that if you live in Tennessee, any child or young adult, there's certain schools, you can get the first 2 years of education, basically your associate's degree, for free. So why isn't that in Connecticut, right? So we need opportunities for scholarships, decrease in tuition for our families and kids, you know, all of this so we can better educate our children and give them that opportunity for that further education and career opportunities.
As someone who teaches at a state university, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, there are some programs that start that, but it's not universal, right? And not available for everyone. Anything about, I know part of the challenge is also, you know, producing good citizens. Is there anything, you know, in there and here we can think of that can help overall for opportunities to promote, to prepare people to be good citizens, our students to be good citizens?
I think, Alicia, this here too, this is where we would want to urge the legislature and the department to loosen the screws around academic accountability, because I think a lot of teachers who formerly did some pretty amazing things with their kids now no longer feel like they have the liberty to do it because the onus is on them to, you know, get the SAT scores up or whatever. So I think, yeah, we need to make that claim or that argument that, you know, we're not minimizing the importance of accountability, but we need to realize that accountability has its place, but it can't also be allowed to cheapen everything else.
Yeah, Tracy, you're
Oh.
muted, Tracy.
Sorry about that. Alicia, just going to your question about making kids good citizens. You know, my daughter goes to a private Catholic school, and as part of that, her education, it's mandated that they do community service hours, right? Now, this could probably overwhelm our kids and families, but it does add value with, I think Roseanne had said about volunteering, right? Doing good for others. There is some worth in that for our kids and families to feel like they're helping others. It's a thought. I wouldn't want to necessarily overwhelm them even more. But if kids look at it as something that's fun, right, and they can do this with other classmates, maybe that's not only are they learning a skill, but they're learning how to be kind and being helpful to others.
And I can see some of the things that we do come forward if a legislature would like to recommend them as good, you know, possibilities, not legislate them, but recommend them as a legislature that these, whatever they are, including something like this, might be good. And you can consider doing that, and how you offer it could be more of a school decision, but that it is there as good practice and could be very helpful for the whole development of a child. I can see us doing that. And we have to kind of explicitly state that we're not asking for more mandates of what's, you know, required, that every child have X number of hours by the time they, whatever the criteria would be. That would not be helpful.
So Alicia, I just checked with someone,
Yeah.
and the junior colleges and community colleges in Connecticut are free as of
I
last
thought that was
year.
at least a couple years. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, as of like last year. Yeah.
Okay. And that's going to remain how long, Anne-Marie? Do you know? Is
Oh, that's going to remain, right?
okay? It's not a.
No, it's remaining forever. I'm
Okay,
on the line
good.
with someone just to check, because
Yeah,
I
thank
thought that you do get 2 years at community college for free in Connecticut.
Okay,
That went through
good.
the legislature last year.
Right.
It has to be at a community college, I think, though. It can't be at
Yes.
2 years at Christopher's College. For
No,
example.
at a
It's not gonna
community
work.
college.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Good
But
to
are
know.
there
Thank you.
restrictions on that? Like, do you have to be coming out of college? Can you have had other college credits? And sometimes I'm not sure it's totally free for the kind of kids that maybe we're talking about. So I don't know if we could check into that. That would be good.
We
Yeah,
will.
We'll check into it and we'll put it in the notes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Excellent. Anything else for challenged? I don't want to. Actually, I don't want to miss anybody here.
When I think here again, I mean, all of
Yes.
these last three, I think all go back to making sure that educators and others who serve kids are well prepared and receive ongoing training in order to meet the needs of kids. The other piece of it too, you know, and I know Colin has talked about this before, and we're always talking about it in my classes. You know, the districts that have the higher needs have the least amount of wiggle room, right? So, you know, I was thinking as we were talking about volunteer opportunities when Tracy was bringing up that, you know, in the district in which I was a principal and before that a counselor, we had all kinds of opportunities for the kids to be creative and for the high school kids to come down to the early childhood school, and for kids, you know, at the middle or high school level who were struggling academically, but they could come and work with the little kids and help them to learn to read or work with them on different projects. But we had the wherewithal to make that happen. You know, we weren't super wealthy, but we had the ability to do that. But in a New Haven or a New Britain or a New London, you know, they're so more tightly stretched that they really don't have that wiggle room to do that. So I think, you know, I feel like we really need to make sure that we're asking the legislature to examine how it funds schools, how schools in the state are funded, because you still have wild discrepancies between leafy suburbs and the city schools. And, you know, and people can say, you know, dollar for dollar, it might not look that bad, but where the rubber hits the road, you know, the inner city schools have such need that the increased dollars that on paper they look like they're getting really don't go as far as people might expect them to.
Well, and funding for special ed has been seriously considered for a long time, but seriously, the last 4 or 5 years, different proposals have come forward, and it's very difficult to really make that equitable, but not unimportant. And then Christopher, you know, and Anne Marie, that you know we're hoping that IDEA gets fully funded too, which would be very helpful for all of us. And if any year this actually feels like it might be a possibility more than others, so we can hang out hope for that.
Can I, does someone have their hand up?
No, go ahead.
So there was this event that happened in LA where there was a homeless youth at a high school who was actually sleeping on the roof of the high school. And instead of helping the kid, the school actually arrested him for being, you know, illegally up on the roof. And so there's been a lawsuit in California that I think is going across the country around putting trauma or adversity on the IEP. Because right now, SEL doesn't, social emotional SED, right? Doesn't really cover post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, it does, but it doesn't really do it well enough. And so I think really pushing for adequate categorical areas under special ed would be something that we can do. If this lawsuit continues across the nation, there may be a chance under IDA that gets identified. Which is a major issue because the numbers of post-traumatic kids living with PTSD right now are extraordinarily high in New Haven or in any of our cities.
Yeah. I would hope that with McKinney-Vento, that kind of thing would not happen in Connecticut.
Ms. Meredith, your hand's up.
Please.
Trying to find the mute button,
we can hear you now. There you go.
You got it.
Okay, and you can see me too.
Yes, we can.
You know, just a quick addition to the citizenship development piece. I'm a little stuck there, and I see that what it's saying is, you know, engaging in around volunteer activities. And I just wanted to add paid to that. And I think about a program that we run here at DEMAS that offers employment opportunities to minors to help in our tobacco inspections program, you know, and the public good there, or there's an opportunity there, you know, to prevent merchants from selling tobacco products to minors. And, you know, we have programs like those, I'm sure, throughout the state. So I just, all of this to say that, you know, I think there are also, you know, paid, you know, experiences that offer citizenship development as well for youth.
Thank you. The other thing I was thinking with regard to citizen, I'm glad you brought this back up, Ms. Meredith, was the it isn't just volunteer hours, but there's also sort of like civic engagement, not necessarily partisan political engagement, but being involved with city council or school board or what have you.
Absolutely. I mean, another thing that we do is, we fund a lot of youth development programs, where we really train them to be a voice, on committees like these, where you need, the weigh in of the population that's being served. So yes.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Anyone else? Just checking, scrolling through. I don't see any hands.
I'm just looking at Mike. Just wondering, Mike, since you hadn't been able to be here previously, can you think of the students whom you serve in particular, right? It seems like I don't know. It seems like challenge too often is sort of viewed as sort of a nice to have. If everything else more basic is done, then the kid can get a challenge. But I'm thinking, challenging students who've been disengaged might be just the thing to bring them back in, to make them feel, good about themselves, to give them, to help them develop that self-efficacy so they'll want to plug into school more. So I don't know if your organization has done it.
So we do a lot of that with them through us as an organization. I mean, there are some kids who are on a sports team. We try to get them engaged in one pro-social activity. That's one of the goals with them, with us, to figure out, is it sports? Is it volunteering? Is it an after school? Is it a job? Obviously we're into that as well to get them in there. But what happens is, I think like Alice said, I'm sure you're all familiar with the ACE score, like all our, we average all the kids we have between a 4 and a 5 ACE score. So, and this is between ages 12 and 21. So, a lot of this stuff just to get them in, as we say, we're not even trying to close the achievement gap. We're trying to get them in the gap, just to even get them so far into it. So we understand all those kinds of things, and we do give them those, those pro-social activities, and some who can do it, some are, a little bit of a time. But, the example we use with our young people is, or anybody here, although there's a lot, all of us are good talkers, so we don't have this issue, is we say, just imagine if you were to do public, people freak out on public speaking, and just think public speaking for them is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's how they see school. And when we say that, they're like, that's exactly it. I'm always on edge and I don't want to go to school and I'm anxious. So we work with them around those things.
Thank you. So what we plan to do next, and this is all of the meetings that we had scheduled to gather information. So our hope is that we will have a draft, our expectation that we will have a draft to you for the next and our last meeting is Monday, December 6th, once again here at 3:30. And Peter's great about sending all the reminders and notices. And then we will have that draft to share with you so that we can meet our task force deadline of having something to the legislature by the first of the year. Christopher, you want to add anything else there?
Just that, yeah, as you said, Alicia, we'll work on a draft and we'll get it to folks prior to our meeting.
Thank you.
But please don't wait until if you ever brainstorm, like when you're making the bed tonight or emptying the dishwasher tomorrow morning, fire an email to us, because I think all of these thoughts, whenever they manifest, we want to incorporate into the draft. And then it will just be a draft. We have some time between December the 6th, when we're going to discuss it next, and January the 1st, by when it needs to be submitted. But I think it's been a phenomenal group with whom to work, and we have a lot of good stuff here. In particular, I was looking just today at the recommendations from the Sandy Hook Commission.
Yes.
And I feel like we're going to do a lot of quoting, I can imagine, going forward, because there were a lot of recommendations that still haven't been adequately acted upon. And so I think as we're doing the work, I think part of what we need to say to the legislature is, we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel. We're just sort of like picking up wheels that were made and were never, utilized. This work has been done. A lot of good minds have already, come together. So I think, I think we'll have a compelling report, and then our real work, I think, will be, going to the legislative committees of jurisdiction come January and February to make sure that we're driving these messages home.
And I think if we are able to, state how important those findings were from the commission, the Sandy Hook Commission, that are still relevant, and make sure we emphasize that, because they might not have been fully implemented. People thought maybe that they were. So even referencing that, that traumatic event is one that any person in the state is well aware of, and can use that as a firm foundation for a clear understanding of its importance. So Alice, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think that the report is good. The one thing the report misses is around anti-racism. I think that there's been so much out in the last couple of last year, that we could maybe touch on. And Christopher, I'll look for some recommendations. But I also want you to know, it's my understanding, and Commissioner Bai is on the call, I think, that she's working closely with Commissioner Gifford and Durantes to address a lot of these areas. And so it might be useful, once the report is done, to send it to them to reinforce that we have, we understand this is what they're trying to do. And, it's the same thing, only coming all from different places. And I think OPM in the governor's office is a group that needs to be not lobbied, but maybe spoken to. I don't know. I don't mean to be inappropriate on the call, but I think that somehow getting to them would be very critical.
Well, we have Heather and Peter here are excellent to get us that connection and to be able to help us with that. So thank you.
And to that end, Alice, too, I know the lieutenant governor, she's chairing the task force. I think it's a task force or commission. It's an interagency council is what it is, for ending the achievement gap. So I feel like a lot of the things that they're addressing, I think, we will bring back in. But I think the more we're able to point out to the legislator, a lot of these things are already in play. We just need to make sure that they actually are acted upon. So it seems to me we're sort of our group is sort of a convener or a reminder that these things have been happening and, need to be treated seriously. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Well, we've used up almost all of our time. Very well spent, with wonderful support here from everyone. Thank you, everyone, for all of this work. We will have our work cut out for us now, and look forward to working with you then to ensure that we did capture what you had stated in a form that will be acted upon. So that will be our challenge, and we look forward to sharing that with you, that information with you before the 6th, as Christopher mentioned, and then discussing it with you at that meeting. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we will see you then on the 6th.
Excellent.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.